All right, you guys, we are here today to talk about Taurus moons. So we're going to be covering your psychology, what the Taurus moon feels like and is like during childhood, mostly like what your parents were like or how you experience parenting. And we're going to be mixing this with psychological stuff that's coming from Maya, who is such an amazing coach who focuses on inner child work, shadow work, and somatic work. And she studied under Sam Rader and Teal Swan. So she's going to be incorporating some of their wisdom here today. So I'm super excited. Thank you so much for coming, Maya. And let's jump right in. Okay, so what does it feel like to have a Taurus moon? Well, first of all, Taurus is an earth sign. So there's going to be those normal staples of what it's like to be really grounded, really stable, really practical. And these are people who are going to want to have a general kind of consistency in their life. Maya and I were talking about this before. There's an element of wanting safety and routine that can kind of keep them small at times because of their desire for stability. But it's really great. Honestly, like a lot of the people I love most in my life have Taurus moons. And it's really great to be around them because they're so nurturing and they're so reliable and dependable and loyal. So you can count on them to really be there to support you. And they don't have these super volatile emotions. Obviously, it would depend on, certain aspects to your moon, but for the most part, they're relatively consistent and stable emotionally. So this is going to help them a lot in life to achieve certain things, to have balance in their relationships. But sometimes it can be too stable. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because we want to really touch on, what things we can do to make our life more well-rounded. So we're going to touch on the weaknesses of each moon sign in particular, because there's obviously so many good things, but then where is the work lie essentially? So yeah, Taurus tends to be very gentle, very calm. It is a feminine sign. So they're going to have that nurturing quality to them, that supportive quality. Taurus is also connected with the body and with the earth. So they will oftentimes find it quite therapeutic to get things like massages or even be in a profession that is kind of related to earth. And so it's helpful for them to move things through their body with either that's like physical exercise or, like I said, massages or planting things outside, somehow where they're connected to the senses. Food is also going to be something that they enjoy. Maybe they'll be like a little bit of a foodie. And they are really hard workers. So these people aren't afraid to put in effort to go in after what they want. Sometimes they can be a little bit slow to act. So there is that element of maybe needing to hasten up a bit, where Aries had like very quick desires to act on. I think Taurus is a very slow burn, which makes them much more capable of having these kind of long-term commitments and having stability within them, because they're not going to rush and make rash decisions in the process of their relationships or in the approach to their work style. They're going to take things slow, be practical, make sure that it is the best decision, the best way to move forward, and then act. But again, this cannot benefit you. You can lose an opportunity because you don't act quick enough, or, something can come up and it's not really conducive with the desire to be slow and steady. So there's kind of like this risk averse nature to Taurus, where they kind of prioritize stability above all else in a way, or like safety above all else. And I can see this like with my mom a lot, when I did this one event where we had to prioritize like our priorities. Like, so what was your number one priority, and kind of how do you make decisions based off of those priorities? And I thought about, for my mom, like for her number one priority is safety. And for me, a lot of it is growth. And sometimes those things can be directly against each other. So she has kind of always warned me to like make the safe decision, the one that I know will be okay in. But I'm like, oh, I'm just going to go for the full enchilada. Like, I'm just going to take this risk and not have anything planned and type of thing. So that could be a little bit triggering for a Taurus moon who wants to feel like they have a set plan, they have enough money, Having money, having things, having possessions is actually quite satiating for them, or it makes them feel really safe and really stable. So they want to feel that way. And so surrounding themselves by like things that remain makes them feel good, or feeling like they have a bank account full of money to turn to in case something does happen makes them feel really good. So sometimes it can be like a little bit possessive in that way. I had an ex with a Taurus moon, and he just had a lot of stuff in these boxes that he never threw away. And I was like, why are you keeping these? He never looked at them. He never used them. And so that's the kind of vibe. There might be some things that you keep around longer than you need to, or even people that you have trouble letting go or moving on from after the relationship, or, has expired or has kind of lost its usefulness. So there's this element of consistency that kind of is a thread that runs through their life. It's like with their relationships, with their things, with their routines, with their emotions. Like there's just this lack of variation or variability to them. I feel like this might not be true for everyone, but I feel like when they don't express emotion, it might come across in the physical body more easily. I think this would also depend on a few other factors in their chart. But since it's so closely linked with the body, the moon is related to the body, Taurus is related to the body. I think one of the ways that you can almost recognize your emotions is through the physical body. I know that sometimes my mom has trouble understanding how she feels. This isn't related to Taurus moon necessarily, but I think for her, one of the ways it would come up really strongly is like, hey, my chest feels funny when I say this, or something like that. So having some kind of like using your body as some kind of indicator of emotion is, I think, important. Is there anything you want to say yet? Because there's a few more things that I can say.
You can keep going, and then I'm going to talk about what's coming up for me as I'm listening to the characteristics of someone with a Taurus moon.
Okay. Okay, awesome. So one of the things that I really wanted to hit home with the Taurus moon is kind of like this desire for simplicity. When we look at the nodes, like the north node and south node, are like two opposite signs, they kind of have the medicine for the other sign, right? As well as the sign next to it. So for Taurus, they're very simple, but the sign opposite it is Scorpio. These are people who are trying to deeply analyze and understand themselves. They might put themselves into situations that require deep metamorphosis and transformation from the inside out, that require them to look into the shadows of their brains and of themselves, to challenge themselves, to put themselves in kind of crisis situations. So Taurus is the exact opposite of that. Taurus is going to do what it can to avoid those situations. It wants stability and consistency in relationships. So it's not going to enter into conflict. Maybe this can come across in relationships sometimes as a little bit of avoidance, or being a little bit more passive in a way. It is a feminine sign. It's ruled by Venus, which is a planet that puts harmony and relationships and love and equilibrium and peace kind of at the top of its priorities or its pyramid. And so that is something that a Taurus also wants. And so it might not necessarily dive into some of the deeper aspects of its psychological makeup, or some of the more tumultuous aspects of life or relationships, in which a Scorpio would kind of discover new things about itself. Like a Taurus wants to preserve itself. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not trying to create change. It feels safe how it is, and it wants to remain how it is. And like, that's the best way for a Taurus moon to feel like it can move forward. Of course, this will depend on the rest of your chart. This is not like this sweeping kind of scenario for all people, but this is going to be some kind of underlying current. So sometimes this can make people inflexible. It can make them harder to change existing habits. The moon and Saturn are often representative of these ingrained kind of habitual things that we tend to do. And so they might, this lack of flexibility might come out as a little bit of difficulty in their life when they don't necessarily want change, when change is actually maybe the better option. They might either not want to change at all, or be very slow to change and to accept that change is happening, or to accept that, a relationship is leaving, kind of like I was saying before. So there is that element of wanting things to stay the same when nature around us is the exact opposite. It is always changing. So there's this kind of like inherent desire of like holding on and maintaining that contradicts life a little bit. But it's so nice to be around them because they are so stable, and like everything in life seems so volatile at times, that they can be that grounding force. They can be that nurturing, loving, and supporting force that will show up every day at 8 a.m., leave work at 5 p.m. Like, you can trust them. They have your back. So like as a person, they're some of my favorite people to be around, but there are those things that maybe they could work on a little bit in terms of accepting the volatility of life. Also, I wanted to add one more thing. I feel like since they're not super emotional, I think that they're not very reactive, which is quite nice. Of course, they're expressive. My mom is really expressive, but they're not like, having these super strong emotional reactions to things. They kind of just like take life as it comes. Your moon is sort of how you process situations and events and interactions with people. And so they take life in a really steady, kind of calm manner, and they're able to handle difficult situations because of that. They're also really great listeners, and they kind of tend to be maybe a little bit more introverted in the sense that they are really happy with having some solid, familiar people around them, rather than having like this constant kind of social environment. Again, this would be dependent on the context of the whole chart, but yeah. Oh, and one other important thing that's so key in their personality is there's often a heavy focus on the arts. So these people are usually going to be interested in using art as some kind of therapy. So this might be somebody drawing after they get home from work, or somebody who wants to like shop for things like pretty clothes or cool new furniture pieces for interior design. Like that makes them feel good, again, is by setting up things to look really beautiful, or creating something beautiful, like music. Like my ex did music. My mom is always buying new stuff for the house to like make it look a certain way, even though there's enough stuff in the house. And so that's the kind of vibe that they feel good about, not only having stuff, but like producing art, producing beauty for the world to enjoy, because Venus is that planet related to art and beauty. So they really are represented by that.
Okay, are you ready for me?
Yeah, take it away.
Okay, all right. So two things are coming up for me, two different things around when I feel into the energy you're talking about, the things that could kind of dull the experience of life for someone who has a Taurus moon. And so right now we're going to get into the parts that maybe don't work so well. There's some really beautiful parts of all the signs and of this sign too. And I just am here to kind of go toward the more the stuff that can change, which is going to be kind of a triggering topic maybe for these people. So the first thing here is that what I understand, what I believe is that our soul chooses to come into this human body for two main reasons. And the first reason is to evolve, to learn, to grow, to change, to evolve. And two is to feel sensations deeply, feel emotions. Those are things we can't feel as a soul. It's what our human body provides. And so when those are all people's two main reasons for coming here, when we don't allow those things to fully play out, when we don't embrace change and evolution, when we don't embrace full feelings of emotion and sensation in our body, we can sometimes feel like we're a little bit like dead inside, like something's missing, because those are the two reasons we came here, like two reasons we chose to live were those two things. And so I'm feeling that like someone with a Taurus moon, even though they feel safe, and even though that safety feels good, there may be a lack of like vibrancy or a lack of like full aliveness for them, that they maybe they haven't even determined that that's what they're missing, but you might get that sense if you are one of these people or you're around them. So that's the first thing. And instead of looking, from my work, instead of looking at the astrology of this, what I do is I look at the childhood and where these behaviors or patterns would have come from. And it's always so interesting. And we always say this, how they like intertwine and they support each other, right? But what I imagine is someone who has this fear of change or this need for safety and stability. It could come from two things in childhood that are kind of opposing. So it could be one or the other, where there was a lot of chaos in the home, either energetically, outwardly, a lot of moving around, anything like that. And so the way that these people feel in control of life is that strong sense of stability. That's what keeps them safe. Or they grew up in a childhood where there was no excitement, where there was a lot of constriction, a lot of rules, and they weren't allowed to experience change and evolution and kind of like breaking the rules a little bit. And so they just grew up following that. And so there could be those things playing a role here, plus the moon.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little anecdotal part of that because having the moon in Taurus can mean that there is some like this consistency within childhood, or like you said, kind of like you maybe chaos, but then you create that consistency yourself. So for my mom, for example, she grew up in a household where both of her parents worked. She was one of like 4 kids and they had like no money. And so her parents were always busy working. They were super tired. And so she was kind of like, she had her needs met, but her childhood was so focused on survival. Like they barely had enough to get by, that it became one of her core priorities in her life. Yeah. Not the thriving, but the surviving. And that's a lot of what Taurus energy can focus on is how can I survive? I know that my ex, he didn't have a childhood like that. He grew up with like a wealthy family. And I think his mom was just like, there and like really dependable and whatnot. But he did have a little bit of chaos in his family. Like he had all these adopted siblings. That's a lot as a child, like all these new people kind of coming into your life. And so, yeah, I think it's interesting how these things can kind of play out like that.
And typically, like, either we rebel against the way things were done or the way things went in our childhood and we live the opposite way, or we mimic it. That's usually with anything, right? And so that's basically what we're talking about here. And so the other thing, which this is, again, might be a little bit triggering, is that I believe people with this Taurus moon are really maybe deeply desiring, or if they brought this into their life, might live a life that feels a little bit more fulfilling and alive, is a little bit of messiness. So it sounds to me like people with a Taurus moon have this a little bit of an aversion or a resistance to like messy, animalistic primalness. Like there's this little bit of focus on right and wrong, the right way to do things, right? And is that true?
Yeah, I feel like there is definitely like life is a little bit more like simple in the sense that like you have like you like kind of like your morals and you follow that. Like I was saying, kind of like the farmer, I was explaining that, who gets up every day and like does his work, and like that makes him a good person because he like did his job that day. You know what I mean? They don't like,
they don't like veer off the path of what they typically do a lot. There's that safety and that regularity and that routine. So something that could really spice up the life of someone living like this is messiness. And the thing is that, this what I'm about to talk about comes from Dr. Sam Rader's teaching. She's amazing. So if you want to look her up on Instagram, she's really brilliant with this stuff. So basically, when we're around the age of 5, we start really expressing our animalistic selves. Like kids have this. If you watch kids, they're very primal. They're not filtered. They're wild. They scream, they fart, they play, they they sweat, and like there's this messiness to them. They're not controlled, they're not constricted, they're not restricted, they're not really in a cage, and they're not really there's not a lot of like stability to the way they do things. It's erratic. And you know, there's a time to mature a little bit from that. But what tends to happen is that in some people's childhoods, that gets completely conditioned out of them, where, you know, the parents really can't deal with that primalness or that wildness or that messiness. And so they really constrict that in them. And what Sam refers to this as is the constricted coping style. So you can look into that. She has different coping styles that we adopt in childhood. And so bringing some of this messiness back, this primalness back, this wildness back, you know, the expression of emotion or the feeling of emotion, or leaving things literally messy, or making a mess of your routine one day or something like that, could bring actually some anxiety, but also liberation and freedom. Because sometimes when we live so predictably, there's this feeling of a little bit of holding back or caged offness or constriction. And so it could be a really huge gift for you to give to yourself if you have a Taurus moon, to just allow some of that childlike play messiness to come through a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like a great example of this would be to like take a spontaneous kind of road trip or vacation, or
And don't plan it.
don't plan it, or go to a therapist. Because I think one of the simpleness and the stability comes through very heavily in terms of emotional like regulation and processes. So not looking into the darkness, but just kind of focusing on like the things that feel really beautiful, which Venus is like, it wants to focus on the beauty. It wants to feel good. And so there can be a little bit of avoidance of like, what scares me? What fears do I have? Like the animal side, or it's coming from rage, it's coming from fear, it's coming from these deep, intense emotions that maybe are not so easily accessed, that you could go to some kind of like therapy center, or even some like plant medicine thing where you're kind of faced with some of those things in that kind of chaotic, complicated type of Scorpio way. Yeah.
And that's actually where like somatic work comes in so helpful. And I mean, it's helpful for so many reasons, but when we start to work with our somatic selves, our body, our expression of emotion, it's really hard for people who are a little bit constricted with their messiness.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of the somatic work really brings us to a place where we're letting that emotion out. We're letting that anger come out through sound or through movement. We're growling, we're crying, whatever it is. That's the somatic work of moving emotion through our body. And so somatic work can be really hard for people like this at the beginning, but really medicinal for people like this to work with. So somatic work is really powerful. And the other thing I find really powerful for this is dance. Like taking some kind of dance class, or going to an ecstatic dance session, or anything with dance where you have to like move your body in a way, preferably that's not fully guided, is really important.
I love that. Yeah. And especially because they're already so connected to their body, you know, through emotion. So I feel like it's just tapping into it in a less predictable way.
Yeah.
And kind of learning how to work with their best tool. And also I wanted to kind of mention one other thing with having Venus as the ruler of their moon. Venus has like a poise to it. It holds itself with like esteem. You know, people like look up to someone with a prominent Venus. They're likable. They have their ish together kind of vibe, like aesthetically and everything like that. So people with a Taurus moon, they kind of have this, like that feminine side where they are nurturing, they are stable, but they have that poise. And so that's really beautiful. But then it's like not always, like Venus doesn't always get to tap into what Mars energy has, which the Aries moon has. So if you can look at Aries moon and Scorpio moon, you can kind of see the medicine for what you guys need, essentially. So Aries moon is like that wild kind of instinctual side, you know,
Mhm.
and like making quicker decisions. Like, yeah. Do you have anything that you wanted to say about that part, about the slowness?
Well, it's interesting that instinctual factor is animalistic. Like animals don't think, they act on instinct. And so it's bringing that instinctual essence, animalistic essence back online.
Yeah.
Um, and so, and so paying attention to the sensations of your body, because as humans there's going to be moments where things are just a full yes, and it's different than acting impulsively all of the time, which we talked about I think in our last video, that
Yeah.
impulse. But there are moments in life where it's just a yes, and you just act on that yes like an
Yeah.
animal would, you know.
Yeah.
And that's I think important for someone with this Taurus moon to start bringing in. And it's going to be scary at first because there's
Yeah.
not a lot of known in that. But I always like I talk about this all the time, is I came up with this saying, and I think it's so important right here, is like the unknown is where the magic lies. And
Yeah.
so yes, there's safety in the routine and the predictable, but the magic in life lies in that unknown instinctual kind of decision making.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I feel this so strong. I feel like my mom is like the perfect example of this because, you know, I feel like there are so many things that could have happened in her life if
Yeah.
she just would have been okay with taking that risk or stepping into this, like this really dark unknown phase,
Yeah.
or losing something. It's like oftentimes there can be like this desire to not let go of things because it's just familiar, but
Mhm.
that keeps you small. And so I feel like that's the biggest thing to leave here is like, can you experience life, like you said, more vibrantly or in a bigger way, a more magical way because
Mhm.
of your ability to let go of some of the familiar and accept some of the unknowns and
Yeah.
chaotic elements. So
Yeah.
amazing. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think that feels really complete. I think this, like, that's enough to take away, is this primal, wild, animalistic, messy part is so
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
Yes. Awesome. So how can people work with you? And yeah, like what do you do and where can they reach you?
Yeah, so I do two different things. So I speak. So I love leading workshops or talks around emotional intelligence, um, self-awareness, shadow work, inner child work. I love this stuff. It's my life. And I also do one-on-one coaching. So I have one-on-one clients who I work with, and we do shadow work, somatic work, inner child work, all of this as well, one-on-one. So you can reach me at my email, which is mayanicolehealing@gmail.com, or on Instagram, it's I'm Maya Nicole. So IMMAYANICOLE. I'm Maya Nicole.
So it's IMM, right? No, no A in between.
No A, just
Okay.
I am Maya Nicole.
M sounds more like am.
I know, I know. After I made that, I was like, oh, that's gonna get confusing when I start saying it out loud. But
Yeah.
the I am was already taken.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maya. I hope that this was
Thank
helpful
you.
for you guys. We're going to be doing all of the zodiac signs for the moon. So definitely stay tuned. And again, definitely watch the Aries one for some medicine for you guys, as well as the Scorpio one. All right. Bye.